from some traditional email clients. So some email clients such as Outlook, GroupWise, Lotus Notes, First Class, any other email client you may have used in the past, the way emails are organized is when you go to send an email, that email goes into your sent folder. When you receive a reply, it comes back into your inbox. And when you send out another email, it goes back into your sent folder. Now the problem with that is when it comes time to piece together the conversation, what you would have to do is switch back and forth between your inbox and your sent folder and try to figure out what the conversation looked like. In Gmail, all replies are always grouped to their original message to form a thread similar to a conversation. So you're not searching for specific folders or for specific emails. All emails float together in something resembling a conversation. Now you do have the option of turning Conversation View off, and that will organize your emails back in the traditional fashion, which is between your inbox and your sent folder. However, I do recommend leaving Conversation View on. When I first started using Gmail, I thought Conversation View was the absolute strangest thing ever. After about 2 weeks, I realized that it was a much better way of keeping your email organized. Again, what I would recommend is give it a chance, give it about 2 weeks. If you still don't like Conversation View after you give it a chance, you always have the option of turning it off. And when I go back into the inbox, I'll show you exactly what Conversation View looks like. A little further down, again still under our general settings page, there is an option for undo send. What undo send does is actually delays sending your message for up to 30 seconds. So if after you send an email out, you realize you made a mistake, what you can do is simply click on undo. Your message will be undone and you can make any edits before resending it back out. I use this feature probably on a daily basis. I very often send out emails. I'm very notorious for asking someone to call me, and then as soon as I hit send, I realize I included no phone number. Again, with undo send, I can set my delay period for a maximum of 30 seconds. By default, it is set to 10, which means after I send an email out, I have 10 seconds to retract it. I personally have mine set to 30, so if I want to, I can retract an email within 30 seconds of sending that email out. And again, when I go back into the inbox and demo how to send an email, I'll show you exactly how undo send does work. A little further down, we'll also find your signature. And of course, this will be one of those day one tasks when you first get your account. What you're going to want to do is log into your settings, or log into your account rather, then go into your settings, and underneath the general tab, you want to set up your email signature. Once your email signature is properly set up, that signature will automatically appear in your email by default. And then all the way on the bottom, and some would say most importantly, we have our vacation responder. And our vacation responder is similar to the out-of-office assistant. What we can do here is specify a start date, as well as an optional end date, and a subject or message you would like others to receive. Now do note an individual will receive at most 1 email every 4 days, meaning if your vacation responder is on and someone decides to send you, I don't know, 70 emails in 1 day for whatever reason or another, that person will not receive 70 notifications that you're out of the office, at most 1 every 4 days. Additionally, the end date is optional. If I do specify an end date, my vacation responder will automatically turn off on that date. If I do not, I'll have to remember to come back into my settings and turn my vacation responder off when I'm back in the office. Back all the way in the top of our settings page, the tab next to our general tab is a tab called labels. And that's going to be the next tab I click on. Now, labels are Gmail's primary organizational structure. They're similar to folders, however, they're just slightly different. The way I like to think of labels is they're sort of like sticky notes for your emails. So if you can imagine having a hard physical copy of your email, you're essentially just putting sticky notes on each of these emails. Now, in my personal humble opinion, I believe labels are more flexible than folders. And the reason I say that is because with labels, I can have one email exist in multiple different locations. This, of course, is different from folders, where if I store an email into a specific folder, that email can only exist within that one folder, unless, of course, I make a duplicate copy. With Gmail, I can apply one label to, or 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 different labels to a single email, and have that one email exist simultaneously in multiple different locations. Now, our labels page is split up into 2 different sections. At the top, we have what are called system labels. These labels are on by default. There's no way for me to edit or delete these labels. However, I can choose which ones I would like to show or hide in my left navigation bar. And my left navigation bar can be found right here on the left underneath my Compose button. So currently, for example, my inbox, my starred emails, my important emails, as well as my sent mail and my drafts all appear by default on my left navigation bar. I can see they're all set to show, whereas my spam and my trash labels are all set to hide. To access my hidden labels, what I would do is come over to my left navigation bar, come all the way down to the bottom and click on More. When I do that, my left navigation bar expands to show me all my labels, even those currently marked as hidden. Some people, for example, like to have quick and easy access to their spam and their trash emails, so they make sure both of those are set to show so they can quickly and easily access those specific emails directly from your left navigation bar. Underneath our system labels, we have custom labels or labels that you create. So here, for example, I've already created 2 labels. If you are new to your account, you will have no labels here just yet. You have to create them first. But I have one label that I created for my CEO, so I can mark any emails from my CEO with a CEO label. And I also marked any emails from my coworkers with my coworkers label. Now I do have the option of creating a new label directly from my settings page by, of course, coming into my settings, finding the Labels tab, and then clicking on the Create New Label button. However, there is an easier and more efficient way of creating a label, and that's creating one directly from the inbox. And when I go back into the inbox in just a few minutes, I'll point out exactly what how that process looks like. The 5th tab on the top of our settings page, right after Accounts and right before POP/IMAP download, is a tab called Filters. And that'll be the next tab I actually go ahead and click on. Now, just out of curiosity, how many of you currently use any sort of rules to organize your emails in your traditional email client? So whether it's GroupWise, Outlook, how many of you use any sort of rules? And this, again, this can be done with a show of hands. All right, so I do see a couple hands going up. That's good. Most people actually don't use any rules at all. So filters are the equivalent of rules, and what they allow you to do is actually organize your emails automatically by sending an automated action for every email that hits your inbox. So here, for example, I already have one filter set up, and that filter states that every time I receive an email from my manager, Tracy, Gmail automatically marks her emails with a label called Coworkers. So if I received 70 or 80 or 90 emails from Tracy every single day, and I wanted every one of her emails to have a coworkers label next to it, instead of me doing that manually, I can create a filter that tells Gmail to do that for me automatically. Now, just as with labels, I do have the option of creating a new filter directly from my settings page by again coming into my settings, clicking on the Filters tab, and then finding the link that says Create a New Filter, which is currently highlighted. But again, there is an easier and more efficient way of doing this, and that's creating a filter directly from an email message. And when I go back into the inbox and talk about email messages, I'll show you exactly what that process looks like. Before I go back into the inbox, are there any questions about anything under settings? Again, anything I did or did not cover that you might be curious about? If you do have a question, please again feel free to type that into the question pane. I won't guarantee that I will get to that question by the end of the presentation, but at least we'll have a record of that question so I can answer it later. So next what I'm going to do is actually go back into the inbox, and to do that I'm going to come over to my left navigation bar, and I'm going to click on the inbox button right below my compose button. And I'm actually going to switch screens really quick, so do please bear with me while your screen goes a little bit funky. So one of the first things I want to briefly talk about is Conversation View. And as I mentioned when we were going through our settings, Conversation View is one of the ways that Gmail is a little bit different from most other email clients. It's a different way of keeping your emails organized. So here, all the way in the bottom of my inbox, I have an email between myself, Kevin, Kelly, and Michael. The number 6 in parentheses indicates that there are 6 messages in that thread. If I click on the email to open it, I can see the oldest original message at the top of the list and the newest, most recent one at the bottom. So I myself was the first person to send out an email, and I was also the last. I can also see there are 3 older messages in the middle, and if I click on 3 older messages, my thread will semi-expand. Now, essentially what's happening here is anytime someone sends an email in response to the email entitled Snacks in the Lunchroom, that email automatically becomes grouped together into this thread. So you can imagine each email as a separate card, and you're essentially just stacking cards on top of one another. Now, I can also further expand any individual email message by simply clicking on it. So for example, if I wanted to see exactly what Kelly said on April 6th, what I can do is go ahead and click on her message, and her message will fully expand. Now, within any email thread, I have two different options for how I can respond to individuals. I can respond to everyone who is a part of the thread, or I can respond to just one specific individual. In this case, I might want to send an email to just Kelly. What I can do is click on her message to expand it, and then click on the reply button right here on the right. When I click on that reply button, I can send an email to just Kelly. What if I don't want to send an email to just Kelly, though? What if I want to send an email to everyone who's a part of the thread, right? I want to send an email to everyone who's involved in the original email. Well, I can do that as well. To do that, I would come over to any individual email message, and then simply find the drop-down arrow all the way to the right of the message. A drop-down arrow anywhere in Google Apps always indicates you have some options available. If I click on that drop-down arrow, one of my options is to just reply. I can reply to all, I can forward this email, and I can even choose to delete or print this specific message. So again, I have the option of sending an email to everyone who is a part of that thread, or sending an email to just one specific individual. Now, once again, you do have the option of turning conversation view off, and that will organize your emails back in the traditional fashion, which is between your inbox and your sent folder. And what that means is, instead of having all of these emails grouped together, these emails all come in separately as separate emails. Again, I personally feel like conversation view is a much better way of keeping everything organized. I know everyone is different, so do give it a chance. If it's something you're absolutely not happy with, you always have the option of turning it back off. Are there any questions about conversation view before we move on? And again, please feel free to type in the question. I may not 100% be able to get to it before the end of the webinar today. The next thing I want to briefly talk about is composing an email message. Now, this might seem a little bit redundant. However, there are a couple of things that Gmail does differently, and I do want to make sure to point those differences out. So obviously, to compose a message, what we would do is come up to the top left corner of our screen and click on the Compose button. When we do that, we're brought to our Compose a Message window. So here, of course, we can insert some recipients. We can add a carbon copy or blind carbon copy field by simply clicking on the Add CC or Add BCC links. I can include a subject line, attach a file, and of course, insert some text into the body of our message. Now, inserting a recipient is as simple as typing in the first few characters of that contact's name. So for example, if I wanted to send an email to Peyton, what I can do is come over here to my address field and simply type in the characters PE. When I do that, Gmail will show me a list of all contacts in my contact book that contain the characters PE. Initially, this list will be ordered alphabetically. Over time, however, Gmail will recognize which contacts I'm most likely to email and put their name at the top of the list. So in this case, for example, if I type in PE, Peyton's name is all the way at the top of the list, and I can simply hit enter to automatically include his email address. And I can do the same for Kelly by simply typing in KE and then hitting enter. Now, one really cool feature here is the Consider Including feature. So again, Gmail does learn your habits and behaviors over time. It learns what groups of individuals you are likely to email together and offers suggestions for who you might want to add in a specific email list. Now, the Consider Including feature cannot be edited or customized. It's one of those things that happens over time. So as you start emailing the same groups of individuals over and over and over again, Gmail will offer suggestions for who you might want to include in a specific email message. So in this case, for example, if I were to click on Michael's name, and if I click on Kevin's name, their email addresses will automatically populate right into my address field. Again, a nice quick way to help you to not forget to add anyone on a specific email message. Now, let's say I email these 4 individuals on a daily basis, and I'm tired of including their email addresses manually every time I send them an email. I can always go ahead and save them as a contact group. To do that, what I would first do is include all of the email addresses into my address field, and then simply click on the To button right here to the left of my address field. When I click on that To button, a separate window will open that looks like this, where one of my options will be to save these 4 individuals as their own contact group. So what I can do is go ahead and click on Save as Group. I can assign this group a group name, and the next time I go to send these 4 individuals an email, all I have to do is type in that group's name. Again, if you missed it, what I did was I first included all of the email addresses into my address field, so right here. Once I did that, I clicked on the To button right here to the left of my address field, so TO right here. And when I click on that To button, a separate window will open where, again, one of my options is to save these 4 individuals as their own contact group. Now, let's say in this specific email, I want them to review a file I've sent. So I'm asking to please see the attached. Again, out of curiosity, this can be done with a show of hands. How many of you have ever sent out an email that was supposed to have an attachment, but somehow, as if by black magic, the attachment got left behind when the email was sent out? And of course, I see all the hands flying up because it's happened to at least everyone once. I used to be very notorious for doing that, and I'd only ever find out when I get an email back saying, Linus, what exactly am I looking at here? There's nothing attached. Gmail always has your best interest in mind. If it recognizes that you were trying to send an email that's supposed to have an attachment, but you don't actually attach anything, it'll give you a warning before sending that email out. So here, for example, I've written, please see the attached, but I've attached no files. If I were to click on send right now, oops, that did not work the way I wanted to do. Let's go back. Peyton Kelly, please see the attached. If I were to click on send right now, Gmail would ask me if I meant to attach my files. So Gmail recognizes that I have some combination of the words see attached or attachment or attached, and it's automatically looking through my email to see if I actually have anything attached. So it's asking me here, you wrote see the attached in your message, but there are no files attached. If I want to send the email out anyway, I can by clicking on OK, or I can click on cancel, which will take me back to my message where I can make any adjustments. In this case, I want to go ahead and add some attachments. Now, there are 2 different ways to actually attach a document to a file in Gmail, or to an email in Gmail, rather. The first and most obvious is by simply clicking on the Attach a File button. That would open up a separate window where you can simply double-click on the file you want to attach. There is, however, an additional way of attaching a document, and that's by dragging and dropping. So if, for example, I already have the folder open with the file I want to attach, there's no need for me to come back into my email message, click on Attach a File, and find the file location. What I can do is actually simply go ahead and drag and drop a file directly from my folder into the email message. So for example, if I wanted to go ahead and add this lunch budget, what I can do is take this file and drag it from my folder right into my email message to attach it that way as well. Now, do note that that drag and drop feature only works on certain browsers, and that's going to be essentially anything that's not Internet Explorer. So it'll work on Safari, it'll work on Firefox, it'll work on Chrome, of course. If you're an avid Internet Explorer user, you'll have to use the regular Attach a File feature. Now that my file's been attached, I can go ahead and click on Send. And when I do that, I get a notification above my inbox telling me my message has been sent. Now, because I personally have the Undo Send Lab enabled, I can also undo my message. So again, I have my Undo Send set to 30 seconds. So if after sending out an email, I realize I made a mistake, what I can do is click on Undo. My sending will be undone, and I can make any edits to my email before resending it back out. In this case, I might want to go ahead and add some exclamation points, maybe even a smiley face, and then when I'm done, I'll resend the email back out, and I have a fresh 30 seconds with which to work. Are there any questions about composing an email message? And again, please feel free to write that question down, even if I don't get to it during this webinar. Alright, so from this point, I want to briefly segue into talking about labels. So as I was going through the settings page, I did mention that labels are Gmail's primary organizational structure. They're similar to folders, however, just a little bit different. So here, for example, I have an email from Julie. Now, perhaps Julie sends me emails that are always in regards to training, and I want to mark this specific email with a label called training. To mark this email with a label called training, what I would do is come all the way to the left of that email and find the little hollowed out square. So to the left of every single email in your inbox, you can see a little hollowed out square, and that square allows you to check the email so you can apply an action to it. So in this case, for example, if I were to click on the email between myself and Julie, I can see the email becomes highlighted. It has now been checked. I can also see this little toolbar appear above my inbox, and this toolbar allows me to apply certain actions to my emails. So the button all the way on the left is my archive button, the button in the middle is my spam button, this is my trash button, and the button all the way on the right is my labels button. It's the button that looks like a little label. When I click on my labels button, I have the option of assigning a pre-existing label or creating a new one on the fly. So I did mention you do have the option of creating a label directly from your settings page or creating a label directly from your inbox, which is what I'm about to do right now. Since this specific email is in regards to training, I want to create a new label and call it training. When I do that and click on create new, Gmail is going to ask me if I want to nest my label. Now what a nested label is it's similar to a subfolder. So essentially, Gmail is asking me if I want to have my training labels exist underneath one of my previously existing labels. So in this case, maybe I want to have training exist underneath my calendar reminders label, or underneath my CEO label, or underneath my coworkers label. Again, it's a way of mimicking creating a subfolder or a sublabel, if you will. Because I don't want to create a sub or nested label, I'm going to leave the box next to the nested label unchecked, and I'm simply going to go ahead and click on create. When I do that, and I can see it's taking a little bit longer to render on your end, there we go. When I do that, I can see a label has in fact been applied to this email by looking to the left of the subject line. So to the left of group test email, I see a label called training. Now by default, whenever I create a new label, that label always appears in gray. For me personally, I like having color distinctions for my labels so I can quickly and easily identify the sort of emails I have in my inbox. So for example, if I want to change the color of my training label from gray to red, what I would do is come over to my left navigation bar and simply hover over the label I want to change the color of. So in this case, I want to change the color of my training label. So what I'll do is come all the way over to my left navigation bar and I'll hover over training. So again, I'm not clicking on my training label, I'm just hovering over it. When I hover over my training label, to the right of my label name, I see a little drop-down arrow. And if you were paying attention earlier, you'll remember that a drop-down arrow anywhere in Google Apps always indicates you have some options available. If I go ahead and click on that drop-down arrow, one of my options is to assign a new color to my training label. In this case, I might want to change it to red. When I do that, the color of my label does in fact change, and any future emails I mark with my training label will also appear red as well. Now, the really nice part about using labels in comparison to folders is that I can apply multiple labels to a single email and have that one email exist in multiple different locations. So perhaps this email is not only in relation to training, but it's also an email for my coworkers, and it's also an email that's high priority. What I can actually do is come back up to my labels button. I can select the coworkers label. I can select the priority label and then click apply. And when I do that, I can see this email has been marked in 3 different ways, and I can find it in 4 different locations. I can, of course, find it in my inbox, which is where we're at right now. If I come over to my left navigation bar and click on training, I can find that email there. If I click on my left navigation bar and find the coworkers label, I can find it there. And finally, if I come over to my left navigation bar and click on priority, I can find it there as well. Now, do note this is not creating a duplicate copy of this email. It's still just the same one instance of this email, but I can find it in 4 different locations. That's very important to be aware of, because if you make any changes to this email anywhere in any of your labels, that change will be reflected all throughout your account. So what do I mean by that? That means if I go into my training label and I delete this email, that email is going to be deleted from everywhere, not just from my training label. Do keep that in mind. It's not creating a duplicate copy. It's still just the same one instance of that email. If you want to remove a specific label from an email, so perhaps this email is no longer high priority, this is how you would do it. What you would first do is click on the email to open it. To the right of the subject line, I can see a list of all labels applied to that email. In this case, since this email is no longer a high priority, what I can do is click on the X next to the corresponding label I would like to remove, and that email will no longer exist in that one specific location. So now this email will only exist in 3 locations, and that's in my inbox, in my coworkers label, and of course in my training label. On that note, are there any questions about using labels or using labels to keep everything organized? All right, I don't see any hands going up just yet. Again, if we're going through the presentation, even if you have a question about something we already covered, please feel free to just type that into the question pane. That way, again, I have a record of the question. I can answer it at least after the webinar today. The next thing I want to briefly talk about is archiving. Now, this next part is also very important because archiving in Gmail is not the same as archiving in most other email clients. So using a show of hands, again, using the virtual raise hand feature, how many of you currently have to archive for space-saving purposes? So how many of you currently archive to save space in your current email platform? All right, so I see a few hands going up. So in Gmail, and again, I'll scroll all the way to the bottom of my account, every single account in Gmail gets 25 gigabytes of storage. Now, if you're not sure how much storage space that is, 25 gigabytes for emails is a lot of storage space. All of us will hopefully be long gone and retired before we get anywhere even close to using up 25 gigabytes. The reason I point that out is because it's no longer to have to delete emails. With the amount of storage space you receive, you don't have to delete any emails. What you can do is you can archive. Now, archiving in Gmail works a little bit different than most other email clients. When you archive in Gmail, it's not compressing your emails into some kind of a weird format. It's not saving your emails locally on your computer. All Gmail is doing is simply removing the inbox from a specific email in your, or removing the inbox label, rather, from a specific email in your inbox. So what do I mean by that? Well, here, for example, I have an email from Jessica, and this email is titled Meeting Today. Now, perhaps this is an email I want to have access to, but I don't want it cluttering up my inbox, right? I don't want to delete it. I still want to be able to refer back to this email, but I don't want to have it cluttering up my inbox. What can I do? Well, I can go ahead and I can archive it. Much like with labels, what I would first do is make sure this email is checked. And once again, to check emails, what I would do is come all the way to the left of that email and find this little hollow dot square. When I click on that hollow dot square, the email again becomes highlighted. I can apply an action to it. In this case, the button all the way on the left on my top toolbar that again appears once I've checked an email is my archive button. If I click on archive, I can see that conversation has been archived and it's no longer in my inbox. So of course the next logical question would be, well, where did it go, right? Where did my archived emails go? Any emails that I've archived will appear in my all mail label. So if I come over to my left navigation bar and I find the label called all mail and click on it, all mail is going to show me everything except my spam and my trash. So that means it's going to show me any emails in my inbox. It's going to show me any emails in my drafts. It's going to show me any emails that have been sent, any emails in any of my labels, and of course any emails that have been archived. I can easily see which emails have been archived and which ones have not by looking for the absence of an inbox label. So here, for example, this email right here is still in my inbox. I can tell because the label next to my subject line says inbox, whereas this email I just archived is not in my inbox, and I can tell because there is no inbox label to the left of my subject lines. If I want to move an archived email back into my inbox, what I would do is, once again, make sure the email is checked. I always have to check an email before I can apply an action to it. When I check that specific email, it becomes highlighted, and the button all the way on the top allows me to unarchive this email by moving it back into my inbox. So again, in this case, archiving is not so much to save space as you're used to with other email clients, but rather to keep everything organized. So one of my coworkers, for example, subscribes to the zero inbox philosophy. And what that means is, at the end of the day, she wants to have no emails in her inbox. So what she does is she archives everything. So she still has access to all of her emails. However, her inbox is completely organized. Again, this is all personal preference. Me personally do not mind having emails in my inbox. I know some people are very avid inbox cleaners. If you're an avid inbox cleaner, you can go ahead and archive your emails as opposed to deleting them. On that note, if you do delete an email, that email is going to stay in your trash label for 30 days. After 30 days, that email is going to be permanently deleted. Do keep that in mind. I know other email clients work a little bit different, where if you delete an email, that email is still available until you manually go ahead and delete that. In Gmail, if you delete an email, it's going to stay there for 30 days. After 30 days, that email is going to be permanently deleted. So again, on that note, I always encourage everyone to archive. You have so much storage space, make use of it, as opposed to deleting. On that note, are there any questions about keeping your emails archived? And again, please type in your questions into the question pane so I have a record of those questions, even if it's something I cannot address right away. All right, I see no questions, so we'll go ahead and move on. So the next thing I want to talk about is using filters. And as I talked about when we were going through our settings, filters are a nice way to keep your emails automatically organized by setting up an automated action for every email that hits your inbox. So of course, we do have the option of creating a filter directly from our settings page by again coming into our settings page, finding the filters tab, and then of course clicking on create a new filter. But there is an easier and more efficient way of creating a filter, and that's creating one directly from an email message. So here, for example, again, I have an email from Jessica. Now, perhaps Jessica sends me 75 emails every single day, and every one of her emails are in regards to training. And I want to have every one of her emails be marked with a training label. Instead of me manually applying a label to each one of her 70 or 80 emails, what I'm going to do is set up a filter that tells Gmail every time I receive an email from Jessica, go ahead and mark that email with a label called training. To create a filter directly from Jessica's email, what I would first do is open up her email. To the right of my toolbar above her email message, I can see a button called More. If I click on that More button, one of my options is to filter messages like these. So I can create a filter directly from Jessica's email. Now, the reason I personally like creating filters directly from an email is that certain information is already pre-populated. For example, if I click on filter messages like these directly from Jessica's email address, I can see Jessica's email address already populate automatically into my From field. I can also filter any emails directed at a specific contact. I can filter any emails with a specific subject line. So maybe I want to filter any emails from Jessica, and specifically any emails from Jessica that contain the word training in the subject line. I can filter any emails with certain keywords, and I can of course even filter any emails that have attachments. If I click on Create Filter with this search, I can tell Gmail exactly what it is that I want to do with every one of Jessica's emails. So I can have her email skip the inbox, which again is the equivalent of archiving it. I can have it marked as read. I can apply it with a star. I can apply it with a specific label, which in this case would be the training label. I can forward it to a forwarding address. If I absolutely hated Jessica as a coworker, I can automatically delete all of her emails. Not something I recommend, but if you want to, you can automatically delete certain emails that come into your inbox. One really cool feature here is that I can also retroactively apply this filter to matching conversations. So in this case, for example, when I created this rule, Gmail already realized that I have 47 matching conversations from Jessica already in my inbox. And what I can do is actually retroactively apply this filter to those matching conversations as well. So if I already had 100 or 200 or 300 emails from Jessica in my inbox, I wouldn't have to go back and manually apply this filter or rules to those existing conversations. My filter can do that for me retroactively. Pretty cool feature. Just to give you an example of how I use filters on my personal account, so not my work account, my actual personal Gmail account, I receive about 2 or 3 emails from my bank every single week. Now, those are emails I want to have access to, but not necessarily emails I want to see in my inbox, nor do I want to see an unread mail notification every time I receive an email from my bank. So what did I do? Well, basically, I set up a filter that stated every time I receive an email from my bank, go ahead and have that email skip the inbox, have it marked as read, and apply it with my bank label. That way, if I receive an email from my bank, it's not coming into my inbox. I'm not getting an unread mail notification. But if I have to access any of my bank labels, I can do so by coming into my bank label by clicking on my left navigation bar. I, right now, in my work account, have about 70 filters set up. I believe that's probably a little bit overkill, but I do recommend at least having 2 or 3 to keep everything nice and organized. The last thing I want to talk about in Gmail, and then I'll briefly open it up for questions, is the search feature. So of course, Google at its core is a search product, and it integrates this feature to almost every one of its applications, and Gmail is no exception. There are several different ways to actually search for an email in Gmail. The first and most obvious is by doing a simple keyword search. So for example, if I come up to my search bar and I type in the word expense report, Gmail will automatically search through all emails that contain the word expense report. Now it's going to search through everything except my spam, which means it'll search through my trash, however it will not show me results from my trash. If Gmail recognizes that I have matching emails in my trash, I will get a notification underneath my search results telling me you have matching emails in your trash. Don't overlook that. I found many emails that have somehow accidentally got deleted that I only found because I went to search for them and it turned out they were in my trash. Now it'll search through the subject line, it'll search through the body of the message, it'll also search for any attachments that contain the word expense report. The search feature is extremely robust. I use it at least 4 or 5 times a day. The second way of conducting a search is by doing what's called an advanced search. So all the way to the right of my search bar, this might be a little bit difficult to see on your end, but do promise me it is there, I see a little drop-down arrow. And this drop-down arrow, again, not trying to beat a dead horse, but always indicates you have some options available. If I click on that drop-down arrow, it brings up my advanced search options. So here I can choose to search from a specific contact. I can choose to search in a specific location. So maybe I want to search through all my mail. Maybe I want to search through just my sent mail. Maybe I only want to search for emails with a specific label. I can also filter or search for any emails directed at a specific contact. I can even search for any emails with a specific keyword or any emails that have attachments. I can also use the Date Within feature to help me narrow down my search to a specific day. For example, if I'm looking for a specific email, and I know that email arrived at some point around June 13th, 2012, and specifically within 2 weeks of that date, what I can do is type in June 13th, 2012, and simply select within 2 weeks. When I do that, Gmail will automatically show me emails that arrived 2 weeks prior to, as well as 2 weeks after June 13th, 2012. The final way of conducting a search is by using what are called search operators. Now, there are about 30 or so operators you can choose from. If you were really interested in becoming a crazy Gmail search expert, what I would recommend doing is doing a simple Google search for Gmail search operators. You'll get a list of about 30 or 40 search operators to choose from. I, however, am going to show you 4 of the most popular ones, and these 4 popular ones will really allow you to do everything it is you need to do. For example, to use one of my search operators, what I would do is come up to my search bar and simply type in the word from followed by a colon. When I do that, Gmail allows me to search for a specific contact. So maybe in this case, I want to look for any emails from Peyton, and specifically, once the email loads, I want to search for any emails from Peyton that contain the word expense report, which in this case should only be one email. I can do the same for to. So if I come up to my search bar and type in the word to, followed by a colon, I can search for any emails directed at a specific contact. I can do the same for is by typing in is colon. So I can look for any emails that are starred, read, unread, marked as important. And finally, there is the has operator. So I can search for any emails that have photos, any emails that have videos, attachments, and I can even search for any emails that have attachments in general. So again, those four basic operators are going to be from colon, to colon, is colon, and has colon. That concludes the Gmail portion of the presentation. The next thing I do want to talk about is the calendaring portion. Before I move on, I again just want to give everyone an opportunity to ask any questions you may have. If you do have any questions regarding Gmail, whether it is something we covered or something you did not or we did not cover, please feel free to type that into the question pane. That way I have a record for the question. On that note, the next part of the presentation, again, we'll be talking about the calendar application. To access my calendar application, what I would do is come up all the way to the top of my black toolbar right here above my inbox. This little toolbar contains a list of all of the different applications that we can work with within the Google Suite. In this case, we want to go ahead and click on Calendar, since Calendar, of course, is the next application that we want to work with. And once more, I'm going to switch screens really quick, so do bear with me here. Now, much like with Gmail, I do want to start the calendar presentation by going through some of the settings. So Gwen, I did get your question. I'm going to make sure to hold that off until the end. And Danny, I got your question as well. I will get to all your questions at the end. Hopefully, there will be about 5 or 10 minutes at the end where I can answer all the questions. And Danny, I know you logged in late. You did not miss much in the beginning, but if you would like to attend another session, I believe we will be doing this weekly. So I will get in touch with you and let you know when we have another session. So again, much like with the Gmail portion of the presentation, I do want to start by going through some of these settings. Now, understanding your settings in Calendar are extremely important for two reasons. First, your calendar is how you stay organized. And secondly, there are a couple of settings that are enabled by default that do change the calendar experience, and I do want to make sure to point those specific settings out. So again, much like with the Gmail application, to access your settings, what you would do is come to the top right corner of your screen, again, find this little cog, wheel, gear, whatever you want to call it. When you click on that, one of your options, again, is to get to the settings page. Now, much like before, whenever you click on settings, notice where you are directed to by default. By default, you're always going to be directed to the General Settings tab, and that's always going to be true whenever you click on settings. Now, underneath General, there are a couple of settings I do want to briefly point out. The first one being time zone. When you log into your account for the first time, you'll do notice that your calendar application is going to ask you for your time zone. Do make sure your time zone is properly set up. If your time zone is not set up for whatever reason or another, all of your events will appear to be a couple hours off. So me currently, I work in Los Angeles, which of course is the Pacific time. I once had my email, or my calendar rather, set to Eastern time for whatever reason or another. And for one whole week, I was really frustrated trying to figure out why all of my events were exactly 3 hours off. The moral of the story is make sure your time zone is properly set up so all of your events do not appear to be a couple hours off. One other really cool setting here is working hours. Now, me, myself, I have a very flexible schedule. I don't really have an 8 to 5 type hour schedule, so working hours don't really work for me as well. However, if you do find yourself working the same hours pretty much on a daily basis, working hours might be something you want to look into. What working hours will do is actually notify someone when they try to invite you to an event outside of your working hours. So here, for example, my working hours are currently set from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. What that means is if someone sends me an email before 9 a.m. or someone sends me an invitation after 5 p.m., that person would receive a warning stating you are currently inviting Linus outside of his working hours. Again, a pretty cool setting, not one I can use, but might be something you want to use by default. Everything else here is pretty your standard basic calendar settings. I recommend everyone spend about 5-10 minutes to see which settings are available, see which ones you might want to enable or change. They're the pretty basic settings that you would find on any other calendar application. All the way on the bottom, though, we have two very important settings to be aware of. If you are the kind of person who takes notes, I would highly recommend making a note of the following settings. All the way on the bottom of our general settings page, we have two important settings. The first one is show events you have declined, and the second one is automatically add invitations to my calendar. By default, both of these are set to yes. I personally believe they should be set to no, and I'll explain exactly what these two settings do right now. When show events you have declined is set to yes, which again is the default, what that means is if someone invites me to a calendar event and I RSVP no, saying no, I am not attending this event, that event will still appear on my calendar. Now, if you're the kind of person who likes to have a visible overview of all the events going on in your department, organization, whatever, you might want to have this set to yes. My CEO, for example, can't attend every single meeting in the organization. However, he still wants to have a high-level overview of what it is that's going on. A question I always get asked when I talk about the setting is, if I do leave this at yes, is there any way for me to differentiate between those events that I've declined and those that I've not? And the answer is yes. If you do decline an event and it still appears on your calendar, that event will be grayed out, so you can differentiate between those events that you've responded to, or accepted rather, and those events that you have not. Underneath that, we have another setting here called automatically add invitations to my calendar. Once again, this is set to yes. I believe it should be set to no. What this setting does is, if someone invites me to a calendar event, before I even have the option of RSVPing either yes, maybe, or no, that event gets automatically added to my calendar. Now, for me, that gets a little bit confusing because I assume once an event is on my calendar, I must have already RSVP'd to it. If these events are being auto-added, I may forget to actually RSVP, and the organizer of the event may have no indication as to whether or not I'm going. I now have mine set to no, which means events only appear on my calendar at the point that I've RSVP'd either yes or maybe. Again, it is all personal preference. Do make sure you understand what it is that these two settings do. They do drastically change your calendar experience, so I just want to make sure to point those out and recommend that I personally have mine set to no, but it is all personal preference. At this point, what I'm going to do is scroll all the way back up to the top of my settings page. To the right of my General tab is a tab called Calendars. That's going to be the next tab I'm going to go ahead and click on. Now, my Calendars page is split up into two different sections. At the top, we have a section called My Calendars, and My Calendar shows me a couple of different things. It shows me, as you might guess, my calendar. It shows me any secondary calendars I've created. So maybe I created a calendar for my department. Maybe I created a calendar for a specific event. It also shows me any calendars I've delegated access over. Underneath my calendars is a section called Other Calendars, and Other Calendars shows me all calendars I have subscribed to. And I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Your primary calendar always appears at the top of the list underneath My Calendars. So because I'm currently logged into a training account, my primary calendar is called Gatehouse Trainer. Your primary calendar, of course, will be whatever your name is. All the way to the right of my primary calendar, underneath my notifications link, is a link called Reminders and Notifications. This is how I can set up my default event reminders. In other words, how do I want to be reminded for upcoming events on my calendar? If I click on Reminders and Notifications, I can see that by default, I will receive a pop-up 10 minutes before each event. Now, I don't know about you, but for me personally, I believe it's a little bit short notice. You might want to receive a little bit more heads up for any events coming up on your calendar. So maybe instead of receiving a pop-up 10 minutes before each event, I want to receive a pop-up, let's say 2 hours before each event. I can also add an additional reminder, so maybe I want to add an email reminder, and specifically I want to receive an email 1 day before each event. I can also add additional reminders for a total of up to 5, and they can be any combination of emails or pop-ups. Underneath that, I can choose how it is I would like to be notified. So do I want to receive notifications for new events? Do I want to receive notifications for changed events, for canceled events? If I'm the organizer of an event, do I want to receive an invitation or an email every time someone RSVPs? Or maybe I want to receive a daily agenda that gives me a daily breakdown of what it is I already have going on every day on that day. Again, very important, do make sure you have your notifications properly set up. If your notifications are not properly set up, you may miss an important event. I personally have 3 notifications I've set up: a pop-up 2 hours before, an email 1 day before, and then a pop-up 10 minutes before. So I'm always going to be aware of all the events coming up on my calendar. I don't have to go through manually and check up my events. Back in the top left corner of your screen is a link called Share This Calendar, and it's right here to the right left of my Reminders and Notifications tab. Now, this is probably the most important page to be aware of in Google Calendar. This is how you're going to dictate how your calendar is shared throughout the organization. Now, there are 2 different ways to actually get to the calendar sharing page. I'll show you how to get here both locations, or both methods rather. The first is by coming into your Reminders and Notifications tab and then clicking on the Share This Calendar link in the top left of your page. When I do that, I can see that by default, my calendar is set to be shared with others, and specifically, anyone in my organization can automatically see my free busy time. Well, what does that mean? Essentially, what that means is anyone in my organization can come into their calendar application, type in my name, and automatically see slots of time on my calendar when I'm either free or busy. If I don't want to make my calendar private, or if I don't want to make my calendar public rather, and I want to have my calendar completely private, what I can do is uncheck the box next to Share This Calendar with others, and my calendar will be completely private. On that note, that is not specifically a setting I recommend, because I do feel that does take away the whole purpose of having a collaborative calendar tool. But again, if you want to be more secret or elusive with your calendar, you can have it set to be shared privately. Underneath that, I can also share my calendar out with specific people. So perhaps I'm working with specific people closely on a project. Maybe I want to give a certain person in my organization, maybe my supervisor, a high level of access to my calendar. I can do that by coming down here to where it says Share with Specific People. In this case, maybe I'm working on a project with Kenny, and I want to give Kenny a new level of permission to my calendar. The highest level of permission I can give anyone is to make changes and manage sharing. If I give Kenny the ability to make changes and manage sharing, what that means is Kenny can actually add events to my calendar. He can take existing events on my calendar and change the event name, change the event date. He essentially has full control over my calendar. He can also manage sharing, which means he can share my calendar for me on my behalf. So if Kenny feels my calendar should also be shared out with other people in the organization, he can do that for me. This right here is the equivalent of delegating your calendar out to somebody else. I can also allow him to make changes to events. I can allow him to see all event details. And of course, I can allow him to see all only free busy time, which in this case is sort of redundant because that's what the default that the organization allows anyways. I can also click on the trash can next to Kenny's name to completely revoke his permission settings and set him back to the default of seeing only my free busy time. Again, a very important page to be aware of. At this point, are there any questions about calendar sharing, who I can share my calendar with, how I can share my calendar? I see someone already asked a question. Again, if there is some time, I will make sure to get to that question before the end of the webinar, or at least afterwards. But any other questions regarding calendar sharing as a whole? All right, I don't see any questions. So what I'm going to do now is go back into my calendar. Once more, I'm actually going to switch screens really quickly, so do bear with me again one more time. So here, for example, I have my calendar application open. In my calendar application, I have a left navigation bar, and my left navigation bar is split up into 3 different sections. At the top, we have a mini-month overview. Underneath that, we have my calendars, and again, my calendar shows me 3 things. It shows me my primary calendar, it shows me my secondary calendar, and it also shows me any calendars I have delegated access over. Underneath that, we have other calendars, and I'll talk about that in just a few seconds. Let me actually remove her. And I'll remove you as well. Currently, I can see all events on my calendar appear in green, right? So all the events that you currently see are my personal events. These events all appear in green. Much like with labels, I also have the option of changing my calendar events. To do that, the process is very similar to changing the color of a label. What I would do is come over to my left navigation bar and simply hover over the calendar I want to change the color of. When I hover over my primary calendar, lo and behold, all the way to the right, we can see a little drop-down arrow. And again, what does a drop-down arrow mean? It means we have some options available. If I click on that drop-down arrow, I have the option of assigning a new color to all of my calendar events. In this case, maybe I want to make all of my events appear in blue instead of in red. When I do that, I can see the color of all of my events do in fact change. Now, I did mention a few seconds ago that there are multiple methods of accessing your calendar sharing page. If I'm on my main calendar page and I want to edit my calendar sharing, what I can once again do is come over to my left navigation bar, again hover over it, clicking on my calendar, click on the drop-down arrow, and then click on the link that says share this calendar. When I do that, I'm brought back to my calendar sharing page. So again, there are multiple methods of accessing the same page. I'm showing you both of those here so you can easily and quickly access your calendar sharing page should you need to. I can also subscribe to other people's calendars. In other words, I can see what other people have going on their calendar. So here, for example, underneath my calendars is a section called Other Calendars. I might want to see what Tracy has going on in her calendar, and I also might want to see what Jessica has going on in her calendar. All I have to do is simply type in their names, and I automatically have access to their calendar application. Again, I did not have to request access to see their calendar. Because the calendar is being shared throughout the organization, all I have to do is simply type in that person's name or email address, and all of the calendars will automatically overlay on one screen. In this case, I can see all of my events appear in blue. I can see all of Jessica's events appear in red, or red, purple, apparently I can tell colors today, and I can see all of Tracy's events appear in yellow. Got that color, right? I can also toggle whose events do and do not show on my calendar by simply clicking on their names. So for example, if I want to hide all of Jessica's events, I can simply click on her name once, all of her events disappear, click on it again, her events will reappear. I can also come back up to my primary calendar, again find the drop-down arrow, and then click on display only this calendar to show me only a specific event relevant to me. On that note, are there any questions about subscribing to a calendar or changing other people's calendars' colors? All right, I see no questions, so I'm going to move on to the next part. And next, I want to spend a few minutes talking about creating an event. Now, there are two different ways to actually create an event. The first and most obvious is by simply clicking on the Create button in the top left corner of your screen. When you do that, you're brought to the Create an Event page, where you can, of course, create an event from scratch. A second way of creating a calendar event, and this for me is the preferred method, and it only works while either in day or month view. Do keep that in mind. It only works in day or week view, is actually by dragging and dropping. For example, if I want to create an event and I want that event to occur on the 13th of December, and specifically I want that event to occur from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., what I can do is simply come to Thursday, December 13th, and then drag from 9 a.m. all the way up to 11 a.m. When I do that, a separate window will open where one of my options is to edit the event. Here again, I can assign this event a name. We'll call it End of the Year Brouhaha. I can, of course, also change my event date and change my event start time and end time. However, because I dragged and dropped across a specific date and time I wanted my event to occur, all that information was already pre-populated for me. I can also choose to make this an all-day event or even make this a repeating event. So maybe I want to have an end of the year brouhaha every week, which would not make sense, maybe every month, which would also not make sense, or maybe every year. I can choose to have this repeat certain days, so maybe every Thursday and every Tuesday. I can choose when this event starts as well as when it ends. Since this is an end of the year brouhaha, it's probably not going to last longer than after the 17th, so maybe I'll have this event end on January 17th. In this case, I don't want to create a repeating event, so I'm going to go ahead and simply click on cancel. To add guests to my event, it's as simple as coming to the Add Guests field right here on the right and typing in a guest's name or email address. In this case, I'll once again invite Jessica, and I'll also invite Tracy as well. When I do that, I can see their names appear below my guest list, and I can see these little dark silhouettes appear next to my guest's name. A dark silhouette indicates that they are a mandatory attendee, whereas a clear silhouette indicates that they're an optional attendee. And of course, to make a silhouette clear, what I would do is simply click on it. Clicking on her silhouette again will turn it dark, and she is now once again a mandatory attendee. Now, once more, out of curiosity, and again, this can be done with a show of hands, how many of you have ever had the fortunate pleasure of trying to schedule a meeting with several different busy people? And I see some of the hands go flying up. It's a fun process when you try to spend about 2 hours trying to figure out half an hour for somebody to meet, only to find out that that person can't make it anyway. Google Calendar has two really cool tools to help you schedule meetings. The first is the Suggested Times feature. So underneath my guest list, I see a blue link called Suggested Times. So in this case, Google Calendar recognizes that I'm trying to hold a 2-hour meeting, and I need myself, Jessica, and Tracy to be available for 2 hours as well. If I click on Suggested Times, Google Calendar will give me a list of dates and times where all of us are available for at least 2 hours. So although we can meet on the 9 a.m. today, we can also meet at 9:30, we can meet at 10, we can meet Friday, and even Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. So I am able to see a pretty generous list of dates and times where all of us are available for at least 2 hours. Much like the Suggested Times feature, there's also something called the Find the Time feature. Back in the top left corner of my screen, next to my Event Details tab, is a tab called Find the Time. This essentially gives me a graphical overview of all of my calendar events. So I can see my events on the left, I can see Jessica's events on the middle, and I can see Tracy's events all the way on the right. The blue highlighted box indicates the time that we're trying to hold this meeting. If there was a conflict, it would look something like this. And what I would be able to do is actually drag and drop this blue box to a new time when there is no conflict. So what I'll do is actually drag this down to a little bit later. When I do that, the time of my event automatically updates from 9 to 11 to 4 to 6. So both of these tools can be used independently or in conjunction to help you schedule a specific meeting. Back in my Event Details tab, I can also add a location. I can add an attachment, so maybe I want to add a specific agenda for end of the year brouhaha. I can choose a custom event color. So of course, by default, whenever I create a new event, that event is going to appear in blue. But maybe I want to differentiate this one event from all of my other events, so I can make this event red, so I know that any events in red are for the end of the year brouhaha. I can also add more reminders, and again, I can add more for a total of up to 5, and they can be any combination of emails or pop-ups. And underneath that, I can choose how I would like to be shown. So do I want to give people the option of being able to book me for an event during this time? Since the end of the year brouhaha, it's not that important. I have more important things to worry about. I may want to show myself as available. So if someone needs my assistance, they can still book me. Underneath that, we have our privacy settings. Because I personally use my work calendar as my personal calendar, which by the way is a faux pas, I don't recommend it, but I do because I don't like checking multiple calendar clients. I do want to make sure that my privacy settings are properly enabled. That being said, if I'm scheduling something like a doctor's appointment or a family visit or some kind of personal appointment, I don't necessarily want everyone in the organization to see that, so I can mark those events as private. which means only myself, as well as anyone else who is specifically able to attend that event, can actually see the details of that event. When I click on Save in the top left corner of my screen, I'll first be notified that I'm inviting Tracy outside of our working hours, which are from 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. If I want to save the event anyway, I can send my invitations. All invitations in Google Calendar are sent through Gmail. To give you an to give you an idea of what an invitation looks like, I'm going to switch back into my inbox for 1 second. So again, do bear with your screen going a little bit funky. There we go. Screen is slowly but surely loading. So here, for example, I have an invitation from Jessica for a training meeting. If I click on the email to open it, I can see I've been invited to a training meeting. That event is occurring on Wednesday, December 12th from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. And I also get a daily agenda for what it is I've going on that day. So on December 12th from 2012, before 9 a.m., I have no earlier events. But after 9 a.m., I have to talk about my quarter goals at 11:30. So with every single calendar invite, Google Calendar is always going to give you a daily agenda of what it is you have going on that specific day. Now, I have 4 different ways that I can actually RSVP to an invitation. I can RSVP either yes, maybe, no, or I can RSVP with more options. If I RSVP with more options, I can essentially RSVP with a note. So if I click on more options, maybe I want to mark myself as a tentative attendee, and I want to give a note explaining why I'm only a tentative attendee. So in this case, for example, I'm going to mark myself as maybe, and the reason I'm only a tentative attendee is because it depends on what information is being covered. So that's the note that I'm going to give so the organizer of the event can see this is my little RSVP note. On that note, one important thing to be aware of. If I RSVP with a note, everyone who is invited to that event can see that note, not just the organizer. So if you're going to RSVP with a note, do be careful about what note you leave. Don't write something like, I won't go unless, or I won't go if Mark is there because Mark is mean, or I'm not going to go if Jessica goes because I don't like Jessica. Jessica and Mark will both be able to see those specific RSVPs. Do keep that in mind. On that note, that essentially concludes the calendaring portion of the presentation. At this point, are there any questions by anything we did or did not cover in the calendar application? Now, we have a quick question here from Skip that Skip asked a little bit earlier, and Skip asked, does Gmail handle read receipts? Let me actually take a look at the Gatehouse Media account. So in Gatehouse Media, yes, you do have the option of requesting a read receipt. So when you compose a new email message, underneath your address field, there is a blue link called Request Return Receipt. If you request a return receipt, the person on the other end will get a notification stating you have requested a return receipt. On that note, if you request a return receipt, that person has the option of whether or not they want to send you one. So if you send someone a return receipt and they say, no, I do not want to send a return receipt back, you will not receive one. But yes, you do have the option of requesting a return receipt if you want to, and simply clicking on the Request Return Receipt underneath your subject line. And Karen, it looks like you already got your question answered. Great. So since there are no other questions, the last part of the presentation today is going to be talking about Drive. And Drive, honestly, is probably one of my favorite applications in the Google Suite. Much like with the Calendar application, to access our Drive application, what we would do is come up to our black toolbar and simply click on the Drive button right here on the left of our Calendar application. And of course, when we do that, we're brought to our Drive application. Now, before we begin, again, out of curiosity, how many of you currently have any sort of experience using Google Documents or Google Drive? I imagine not too many, and the amount of hands going up kind of indicates that to me. So not too many people have experience with Google Drive. Again, I see about 3 or 4 people who have their hand raised. Google Drive is a very, very, very powerful tool. So it's a very powerful tool. Tom, I got your question. Tom, just hold on to that until the end of the presentation. I do see your question. I will get to that at the end. So Google Drive is a very powerful tool. It is definitely something I recommend learning a little bit more about. Since we only have 15 minutes left, I can't get too deep into the application, but I will point out some of the basics. So Google Drive essentially allows you to do two different things. The first thing Google Drive allows you to do is to serve as a cloud storage device. So if I go up on the top left corner of my screen, next to my Create button is a little Upload button. Here I have the option of uploading files and folders. Now I can upload more than just documents. I can upload zip files, images, video files, audio files, essentially any sort of file I want to have access to on the go, I can upload into my drive. Now, of course, the nice part about that is I'm no longer having to walk around with a jump drive. I'm no longer having to email myself attachments, which is what I used to do all the time back in school. I would send an email from one account to another with an attachment. With Google Drive, if I upload an application into my drive, wherever I can log into my Gmail account, I have access to all of my documents. So if I upload something to my computer right here and I go home, or I go on my phone, or I go halfway across the country, I have access to all of my documents. It also states that I get 5 GB of storage. And that 5 GB of storage only counts towards documents not in Google Docs format. Meaning, if I upload zip files or image files or video files or Microsoft Word documents and do not convert them, all of those documents will take up space against my 5 GB. Anything that I keep in Google Docs format, which I'll talk about in just a few seconds, will take up absolutely no space. So do keep that in mind. Anything in, lost my train of thought. Anything that's not in Google Docs format will take up space. Frank, I saw your question. I'll get to that in just a second as well. If I click on the Create button, I have an option of seeing all of the different applications that I can work with within Google Drive. So I can work with documents, presentations, spreadsheets, forms, and drawings. Spreadsheets, documents, and presentations are the equivalent of Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, whereas forms and drawings are something Microsoft doesn't really have an equivalent of yet. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and create a new document. Whenever I create a new document, my document is always going to be called Untitled Document. You, of course, always want to give your document a name so you can easily identify what sort of documents you have in your drive. To change the name of a specific document, what you would do is come up all the way to the top left of your account and click on Untitled Document. When you do that, you can assign this document a new name. And we'll go ahead and call this one, actually no, we'll call this one Holiday Bash. The Holiday Bash is coming up. I'm unfortunately not going to be here. I'm going to be traveling. Very sad about that, but we still have to plan for it. Now, working with Google Drive has two very distinct purposes, or two distinct advantages of working with documents over Microsoft Word. The first advantage is that Google Drive is constantly saving. So as I'm working on my document, we can see here that currently all my changes have been saved. But as I start working on my document, if I start typing in some gibberish, we can see it's saving, and then after a few seconds, all changes have been saved. Oh my God, Friday morning. All changes have been saved. So I don't have to worry about hitting Control-S. I don't have to worry about a power outage. I don't have to worry about documents being lost because my dog tripped over my computer cord. The most I would possibly lose is a couple words in the last sentence. So here I'm going to go ahead and add my Holiday Bash ideas. So we want to talk about where we are hosting the event. We're going to talk about who is being invited, right? Are we going to invite alumni? Are we inviting older employees? Who are we inviting to this party? The second really nice part about Google Drive is that attachments are a thing of the past. So thinking back to how I used to work with attachments back in school, which was not that long ago, when I was working on a document with multiple people, this is what the process would look like. First, I would create a document using Microsoft Word. I would then send that document out as an attachment to 5 or 6 other people. They would each add their own content, send it back with their own unique naming revisions, and my job would be to take those 5 or 6 documents and combine them holistically into one. That, of course, is a huge waste of time that can be better spent doing something else. In Google Drive, attachments are essentially a thing of the past, and what we do is we share documents. So in this case, I want to share this document with one of my coworkers, Kelly, who's helping me plan the holiday party. So what I'm going to do is come up to the top right corner of my screen where it says Share, and I'm going to share my document with her. I can currently see that my document is set to private, which means only myself, as well as anyone else who specifically has access to this document, can actually access my document. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and share this document with Kelly so she can access the document with me. I can also choose what level of permission I want Kelly to have. So do I want Kelly to be able to edit the document? Do I want Kelly to be able to comment on this document? Or do I want Kelly to be able to only view this document, right? What sort of permission do I want to give Kelly to be able to work on this document? In this case, I want her to be able to edit the document. I'm going to add a little message, and her message is going to say, please add your end of the year items. When I click on Share and Save, instead of receiving an attachment, Kelly's actually going to receive an email with a link to this document. To give you an example of what this looks like on her end, we can see here Kelly has, in fact, received a document from me. If she clicks on the link to open the document, she'll be taken to the exact same version of the document that I currently have open. So all of us can work on this document simultaneously. I can share my document with as many people as I want, and up to 50 people can be working on a document at one time. On that note, do I recommend working on a document with up to 50 people? The answer is no. That would be a logistical nightmare. But if you had to, you can work on a document with up to 50 people. Once Kelly enters the document, I can see in the top right corner of my screen that there is in fact one other viewer. If I click on one other viewer, I can see who that viewer is. I can see that is Kelly. This right side pane also serves as the chat window. So I can chat with Kelly while we're working on this document together. So hey Kelly, please add what you think we need to add. Oops, what you think needs to be added. And Kelly, of course, can respond in her own chat window as we're working on this document together. Now, the second nice part about working in Google Drive is that all the documents are being uploaded, or updated rather, in real time. So if I go into Kelly's account and start working on the document on her end, Kelly wants to talk about what food we should bring and if we should work on any promotional posters. You can see that despite the fact that I'm working on Kelly's end of the document, all the information is being updated in real time on my end. So I can see all of her updates on my end of the screen. So I can see not only what it is that she's typing, but I can see exactly where she is typing in the document. If I hover over her pink cursor, I can see exactly that is Kelly, and I can see exactly what part of the document she is working on. Once enough information has been added to this document, what I can do is come back up to my share page, and I can change the share permission from maybe can't edit to only can comment. So now Kelly can't add any more information, but if she wants to, she can actually comment on a certain part of the document. This, of course, is a drastic difference between how we work with attachments. If I were to send an attachment to 5 or 6 other people, I have complete loss of control over that document. With Google Drive, despite the fact that my document might be sent out to 70, 80, 90, or 100 people, I always have the last say of who has access to my document. Now, one concern you might have when you're working on a document with multiple people is that someone comes in and adds something inappropriate or removes an important piece of information, right? Someone just comes in and completely butchers your document. With Google Drive, you don't have to worry about that because all versions of the document are constantly being saved. If, for example, I click on File in the top left corner of my screen and then click on See Revision History, this tells me the story of this document, so I can see what this document looked like throughout all changes of its inception. So this morning at 10:15 a.m., the document looked like this. Essentially, all I did was change the name of the document to Holiday Bash. At 10:16 a.m., the document looked like this. I can tell anything added in green was added by myself, and I can tell that because the cursor next to my name is in fact in green. At 10:17 a.m., the document looked like this. All I did was add some more information and remove all the gibberish. And at 10:21 a.m., the document looked like this. And of course, I can tell anything added in pink was added by Kelly because the cursor next to Kelly's name is in fact in pink. So using my revision history, I can not only tell what information was added, but I can tell when somebody entered the document, and I can tell what information they specifically themselves added to my document. So I always have full and final control over my document. A complete 360 from how we worked with attachments. If I click back on File, I have a couple more options. I can also choose to download this as a Word document. So maybe I don't want to work on this exclusively online. Maybe I want to work on this on my own Microsoft Word document. Maybe I'll send this as a PDF. Or maybe I want to send this document to somebody who does not have Google Docs, right? I'm sure there's people in the organization who are just absolutely afraid to use Google Drive. They're not going to use it. They're only going to stick to their old school Microsoft Word. Not a problem. If you want to go ahead and email this as an attachment, Google Drive will actually convert this for you right online, and I can go ahead and send this document out as a Microsoft Word document or maybe even as a plain PDF. So I'm not limited to just working online. I can still share my document with other people despite the fact that I'm working within Google Drive. Oh, one thing I actually did forget to show. Let me reopen my holiday party. Oops, not that one. Which one did I just create? My drive. Party agenda. There we go. The revision history actually allows me to actually also revert back to any previous versions. Oh, holiday bash. Here we go. It allows me to revert back to any other previous versions. So if, for example, I want to revert back to an older version of this document, what I can do is open up my revision history, select an older version of the document. I can restore this version, and my document will be restored back to the way it was before Kelly made any edits. On that note, are there any questions about the Drive application? Again, anything I did or did not cover? At this point, I would like to answer a couple questions people did have. So, Tom asked, does Gmail offer an unsend option? Sorry for the late question, by the way. So, Tom, Gmail does offer an unsend option. Let me go back into the Gatehouse account really quick. If you go into your general settings, to do that, what you would do is find this little cog right here in the top right corner of your screen, and you click on Settings. Underneath your general settings page, there is an option for Undo Send. You can set this for up to 30 seconds, and what this will do is actually delay sending your email for up to that time period. So if after sending out an email you realized you made a mistake, what you can do is simply click on Undo. There'll be a notification above your inbox telling you can undo that message. Your message will be undone and you can make any edits. This works a little bit different from retracting emails because the email is not in fact being sent out until that 30-second period elapses. After that 30-second period has elapsed, the email will be sent out. And again, what you want to do is come into your settings page. Underneath General is an option for Undo Send. I recommend set the cancellation period for up to 30 seconds so you have the most amount of time to retract an email after it's been sent out. Frank asks, I have uploaded PDFs in the past to Drive, but found that when viewing them in Drive, the picture/viewing quality goes down. Why is that? Frank, I've honestly never noticed that. When was the last time you actually uploaded a PDF to a Drive application? It might have just been because you were working with an older version of the application. I've never once had an issue opening PDFs in any of my documents. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can even test that out really quick right here. Let's see if I have a PDF I can work out. Nope, no PDF, unfortunately. But again, yeah, it's it shouldn't really change the quality too much. It was last week. All right, send me an email. I'm gonna be sending up a follow-up email after this webinar. Send me an email. Let me know what the issue was. I'll take a look at that. It might have just been the document, but again, I have not had an issue with that. But please follow up with me so we can make sure that gets figured out. Karen asks, will the Internet Explorer calendar be able to be incorporated into the Google accounts without being entered individually? Karen, I'm not 100% sure what the Internet Explorer calendar is. Is that a separate calendar offered by the actual browser itself? And then while we're waiting, one last thing I do want to show. I know there was a lot of information thrown your way. Believe it or not, that only scratches the surface of what Google Apps can do. There is a lot more. I could probably spend about 2 hours on just Gmail alone. If you want a refresher on anything that we've covered today, or if you want to learn more about the migration process, if you want to learn more about specific applications within the Google Suite, there are some resources that SADA and Gatehouse have worked together to create. Within every single account, all the way on the right of your black toolbar is a button called More. When you click on More, oops, I'm in the wrong one right now. When you click on More, one of your options is to access a Gone Google site. This Gone Google site is a central hub of resources that contains all information regarding Google Apps, whether it's migration, whether it's learning more about specific Google applications. Additionally, there's also something called Google Apps Training. This actually allows you to train or learn about different apps regarding or has small little training videos regarding different apps within the application. So for example, if you want to maybe just have a brief refresher on Gmail or just a brief refresher on Calendar, this Google Apps training link actually contains a list of short videos that allow you to learn at your own pace. So again, two very important resources to be aware of. If you click on More, the first is the Gone Google site, and the second is Google Apps Training. So Karen Morris asks a Microsoft Outlook calendar. Karen, that is a tricky question to answer. The answer is yes and no. There is a third-party tool that actually works together to sync Microsoft Outlook calendar events with Google Calendar. So if you do have any events on your Outlook calendar and you want that to be able to migrate or synchronize with your Google Calendar, there is a third-party extension tool that does do that. It's called I believe it's called Google Outlook Sync. It's a third-party tool. We are not allowed or not supposed to be recommending third-party applications. I used it in the past. It does work pretty well if that's something you want to look into. It is an option. Again, by default, that is not available, but if you download that third-party application, and again, if you're interested in learning more about that application, I can send you some details, but it is possible, just not by default. Pat Peterson asks, when today will the email be live? On that note, and Gwen had a similar question about how do I need to set up my current email forwarding. Anything related specifically to how migration is going to be happening in your specific site, I would recommend getting in contact with the CIT or the information director at your department. I don't have all that information. I know the go-lives are scheduled for each Friday. When that's happening specifically, I cannot answer accurately, so I'd recommend is getting in touch with your information technology director. That person would have more information about that. I unfortunately do not know how the different sites are migrating over, so I don't have all that information ready. Is there a way to transfer contacts from Outlook Express? There is a way to do that. What you would have to do in the Outlook Express account is to download all of your contacts into a CSV file. Unfortunately, this is kind of beyond the scope of the presentation today, but again, what you can do is log into your Outlook Express, find your contacts page. Within your contacts page, there should be an option to download all your contacts as a .csv file. Again, that's .csv. When you have that specific file and you go into your contacts, there will be an option to import contacts, and you can actually import contacts using that CSV file. So again, the first thing you want to do is make sure you can download that CSV file from Outlook Express. Once you have all that information, you can go into your contacts page by again clicking on Contact on your black toolbar. All the way in the bottom left is an option to import your contacts, and once you have that CSV file ready, you can actually choose that file and upload it to your account. Go ahead and try that out. If it doesn't work for you for whatever reason, I'd be happy to work with you. Again, I will be sending out a follow-up email after this webinar, so you will have my email access at hand if you have any questions. On that note, that does conclude the presentation today. I do appreciate everyone's time and everyone's great questions. Most people are not as interactive as you. I hope everyone has a great rest of the day, and I also hope everyone enjoys the rest of their Friday and their two-day weekend coming up. Thank you, everyone. Take it easy. And very quick question, I see Gwen asked something. Do you know if that export email contacts work with Mac OS and Mail? Gwen, I don't have much experience using Macintoshes. My gut instinct tells me yes, that Mac OS Mail would also have a .csv option. That .csv option is the universal way of actually organizing your contacts. It's not specific to one specific email client. So if it works in Outlook, if it works in GroupWise, if it works in Lotus Notes, I'd be very surprised if it did not work in Mac OS. And again, that's something you might want to contact your IT instructor or IT director for, but I'm pretty much 100% sure that the option is available.